everyone, my name is Anika and welcome back to 8th grade science with Allstem. This video covers part 1 of the Earth Systems, Structures, and Processes standard. We'll be talking about the hydrosphere and the materials in the ocean. As always, each of our review questions is timestamped, so you can skip the explanations for questions you feel confident in and move directly on to the next timestamp. If you feel that you need extra practice with specific questions after the video, check out our links for further reference page, which has resources for each question. It's linked in the description box. Alright, now let's get into the first question.
Question 1. Fill in the blanks of the following passage using the word bank. You're probably going to need to pause the video here to look at the passage. Okay, so the final passage looks like water covers approximately 71% of Earth's surface. 97% of this water is not drinkable because it is salt water in the oceans. Out of the remaining 3% that is freshwater, nearly 69% of it is frozen in glaciers and ice caps. Around 30% of it is underground, aka groundwater. The remaining approximately 1% is known as surface water, which basically consists of fresh water in water bodies such as rivers, lakes, and swamps. You should approximately know these 5%. How much of the surface is water, how much of that water is salt water, how much of it is fresh water, how much of the fresh water is frozen, and how much of the fresh water is groundwater. And this little diagram over here should help with that. Question 2. If a lot of water in a given ocean froze to form sea ice, how would the salinity of the remaining water be affected? A. Its salinity wouldn't change. B. Its salinity would increase. C. Its salinity would decrease. D. There's not enough information to tell. The answer is B. Its salinity would increase. So if you got that right, go ahead and skip to the next question. Otherwise, let's take a look at why the answer is B. So let's say this diagram over here is our ocean, and these little circles are salt, and the ocean water has salt because ocean water is salt water. So when ocean water freezes and sea ice is formed, only the water freezes, but the salt stays in the remaining water. So our new diagram, and this thing right here is the ice. The water, some of the water froze, so that's why the water level went down. But it's the same amount of salt because the salt stays in the remaining water. So if there is less water, because some of it is frozen now, but there's still the same amount of salt, that means that there will be more salt per unit of water, aka increased salinity, because salinity is salt per unit of water. The same goes for evaporation. Only water evaporates, not salt. This means that there will be less water but the same amount of salt, aka increased salinity. The opposite goes for melting sea ice. When the ice melts, there's more water. It's the same amount of salt, but more water, so less salt per unit of water, aka decreased salinity. Question 3. Fill in the blanks in the table to match the process of the water cycle to its definition. You may need to pause the video here to take a longer look at the table. The answer to this question is this table. So the first one is evaporation, second transpiration, third condensation, fourth precipitation, fifth infiltration, and sixth runoff. The steps of the water cycle are pretty basic earth science concepts, so you should definitely know what each of these processes means. You might also want to look up what each of these processes looks like on a diagram of the water cycle. Question 4. Because estuaries are areas where both freshwater from water bodies such as rivers and lakes and saltwater from the ocean mix, They have A, low biodiversity, B, rough waters, C, high biodiversity, and D, no risk of pollution. So the answer to this question is C, high biodiversity. So let's look at some of the main features of estuaries. They contain mixed nutrients from both freshwater and saltwater. They're shallow, which allows sunlight to penetrate to the bottom, and they're known as the nurseries of the sea due to the calm conditions that make estuaries a good place for raising young. So, based on these three features, let's try to eliminate some answer choices. So, answer choice A says low biodiversity. So, if estuaries have nutrients from both freshwater and saltwater, they have lots of nutrients. This is good for aquatic life. Because they are shallow and allow sunlight to penetrate to the bottom, even organisms at the bottom can get both nutrients and sunlight. Lastly, many young animals are raised in estuaries. All of these things mean that estuaries cannot have low biodiversity. So let's eliminate answer choice A. Answer choice B says rough waters, but we know that estuaries are known to have calm waters, so it can't be answer choice B. Let's look at answer choice C. Answer choice C says high biodiversity. So, for all the same reasons that answer choice A cannot be possible, answer choice C is very likely. All these factors about estuaries do support high biodiversity. And even though we know the answer is very likely to be C, when solving a question, it's always important to check all the answer choices. So, answer choice D says no risk of pollution. Estuaries do not have no risk of pollution. Although they have many organisms that filter certain types of pollution, no water body near people has no risk of pollution. There are many pollutants that humans release into water bodies that not even these organisms can handle. So the answer choice is C. Question 5. Why does upwelling cause rapid reproduction of phytoplankton? A. By pushing the phytoplankton even further towards the surface. B. By pushing the phytoplankton down toward the bottom of the sea, where they get more nutrients. C. By sending nutrients up to the surface layers, where phytoplankton already thrive. D. It doesn't affect the phytoplankton at all. So the answer to this question is C, by sending nutrients up to the surface layers, where phytoplankton already thrive. So if you got that right, go ahead and skip to the timestamp of the next question. Otherwise, let's take a look at how we find the answer to this question. So the first question is, what is upwelling? So when wind pushes the warm surface waters away, the deeper cold waters in the ocean rise to fill the space. They bring with them all the sediments and nutrients from the ocean floor. Because of this, surface areas with upwelling tend to have high biodiversity because of all the nutrients coming up from the ocean floor. So, how does this affect phytoplankton? Phytoplankton need sunlight to survive, so they're at the surface of the ocean. But once they get the nutrients from upwelling, they can reproduce very quickly. This attracts other organisms that want to eat them, giving the area high biodiversity. So, how do we know that the answer choice is C? Well, for A and B, we know these answers don't work because upwelling doesn't move the phytoplankton. A says that it pushes the phytoplankton even further towards the surface, which isn't true because phytoplankton are already at the surface. And B says by pushing the phytoplankton down towards the bottom of the sea, which doesn't work because the water is coming up from the bottom. And answer choice D doesn't work because the phytoplankton are definitely affected by the nutrients. Question 6. What are the three main gases that are dissolved in seawater? The answer the answers are nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon dioxide. So, seawater can hold many different gases within it. The ocean and the atmosphere exchange many gases. This is one of the reasons why the ocean affects climate so much because it takes in many of the gases from the atmosphere. The main three gases in the atmosphere are also nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon dioxide. This is why these are also the main gases in the ocean. Question 7. Pick one for each. 1. Cold water can hold more or less gas than warm water. 2. The more salt a body of water has, the more or less gas it can hold. 3. Deeper waters, which are under more pressure, can hold more or less gas than surface waters. The answers to this question are more, less, and more. So this just comes down to some of the principles of water. So when water is colder, it holds more gas. When water is saltier, it holds less gas. When water is deeper, and therefore under more pressure, it holds more gas. So by these three principles, we know that cold, low salinity, deep waters have lots of dissolved gases. Question 8. Dissolved chemicals eroded from Earth's crust and washed into the ocean, ejections from volcanoes, and particles/sediments swept into the ocean all make the ocean A. Hotter, B. Cooler, C. Salty, or D. Polluted. The answer is C. Salty. And this is just because sediments and particles from land are what make the ocean salty. Question 9. Water impacts which spheres on Earth? A. Hydrosphere, B. Atmosphere, C. Biosphere, D. Lithosphere, or E. All of the above. The answer is E. All of the above. Water impacts all the spheres on Earth. There are four major spheres on Earth: the hydrosphere, which is all the water on Earth's surface, the atmosphere, which is all the gases that surround Earth, the biosphere, all the living things on Earth, and the lithosphere, all the solid materials that make up Earth. Basically, things like Earth's crust, rocks, minerals, etc. You'd think that water only affects the hydrosphere, but processes in all these spheres depend on it. How could we have the biosphere, which is life, without water? Isn't the climate, which is the atmosphere, affected by oceans? Water is important to everything on Earth. Question 10. The ocean can store lots of heat. This stored heat has what effect on climates near oceans? A. Climates near oceans are more extreme than inland areas. B. Climates near oceans are milder than inland areas. C. Climates near oceans are not affected by the heat within the ocean. The answer here is B. Climates near oceans are milder than inland areas. Because the ocean takes heat from the atmosphere, climates near oceans are milder than inland areas. The ocean regulates the heat in those areas. Climates all over the world are determined by oceans. Ocean currents move energy, heat, and resources between different spheres of Earth. It's also important to know that oceans affect climate because of how much carbon dioxide they can store. Because the ocean absorbs these things, the effects we see of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere aren't that extreme. If the ocean couldn't absorb carbon dioxide and heat, global warming would be going a lot faster. Question 11. What are the features on the seafloor out of which mineral-rich water flows? They are powered by volcanic activity, and the areas around these features tend to be biodiverse and productive. So the answer is hydrothermal vents. So let's talk for a second about how hydrothermal vents work. First, seawater gets into oceanic crust. When volcanic activity from under the surface pushes the water out of the crust, the super hot water that's bursting out of the crust brings back with it the minerals that were in the crust. This is a basic diagram of hydrothermal vents. So they look like smoke almost. These things are the super hot water that's coming back with the minerals in the crust. Question 12. Which of the following could be one of the adaptations of an organism living in the aphotic zone? A. The ability to carry out photosynthesis. B. The ability to breathe air. C. The ability to deal with immense pressure. D. The ability to live in areas of extreme heat. The answer is C. The ability to deal with immense pressure. So the photic zone is the portion of the ocean which receives sunlight. Plants are found only here because they need sunlight for photosynthesis. Phytoplankton, another group of photosynthetic organisms, are the most abundant plants in the ocean. Because plants like these are the primary producers for marine food webs, many animals come to the photic zone. Biodiversity is high in this zone. The aphotic zone, which is the one this question is about, is the portion of the ocean which doesn't receive sunlight. Photosynthesis cannot take place here. It's also incredibly cold and there is a lot of pressure as you go deeper into the ocean. Organisms that live here need a lot of adaptations, including adaptations to the temperature, pressure, finding food without photosynthesis, and even bioluminescence, which means producing their own light. Based on all the information, we know that aphotic organisms can't perform photosynthesis because there's no light in the aphotic zone, can't get to the surface to breathe air, and don't have to deal with extreme heat. This leaves only answer C. Okay, last question. Question 13. Why do the environment affecting actions of people who don't live near water still affect water bodies? A. They don't. B. All land drains to a water body. C. Transpiration. Or D. Sublimation. The answer is B. All land drains to a water body. Everyone lives in a river basin. A river basin is all the land where that land's water drains into the same river. For example, all the land in the Cape Fear River Basin drains into the Cape Fear River. Then this river drains into the Atlantic Ocean. All the water in a river basin ends up in an estuary or ocean. This means that the actions of people on land affects water far away from them. Once the water from their land gets to the river and then goes to an estuary or ocean.
Okay, like I said at the beginning of the video, if you need extra practice with specific topics, check out our links for further reference page, which is linked in the description box. If this video was helpful for you, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in part 2.